Hey guys, this is your friend in programming Kodajit, and today I'm going to talk about something that I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks. Now, I'm making an app in Electron lately, and I'm learning Electron, and I've also been making a lot of tutorials on Electron. I guess you watched some of them. And 2 weeks ago, I started learning a new technology that is actually now just released recently in the market, and the impact that it can create and I can tell you that it's something really exciting. It's something that excites me because I think it can enable us programmers to create solutions that reach more people. So today I'm going to make a comparison between Electron and .NET MAUI. So this is a new technology from Microsoft which is going to kind of replace WPF, which was designed for Windows, and in a limited fashion after reporting to XAML in Xamarin. It was used for making mobile applications too for Android and iOS. So pretty capable platform. Applications would work on either Windows using WPF, and then you can use Xamarin separately to create applications that would work in mobile platforms like Android phones and iOS phone. But these two were separate from each other. So firstly, WPF could not create software for iOS, and Xamarin could not create software for the desktop. But that has changed with .NET MAUI. And I got to tell you that this platform has given you some new access. So Electron today, it works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So when you create an app in Electron, and we've got a bunch of these apps like Visual Studio Code is written in Electron. Of all things, it's a very popular code editor. And Slack is written in Electron too. And these applications can run on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Electron works on all three. And .NET MAUI, the later technology that was just recently introduced, with it you can create apps that run on Windows, on Mac, iOS, and Android. So it's got four platforms. And the biggest revolution, the biggest change is that now you can run applications created by MAUI on desktop and mobile platforms using the same code base. That's the most important, biggest change. You can create an app that will scale and run properly on Windows, and then the same app, more or less, with UI changes, of course, is going to run on Android too and iPhone too, and now you can even compile it and run it for Mac. This is something we didn't have access to at all earlier using the .NET technologies, which in fact I've been coding in since decades now, and I love .NET, I love C Sharp, and I really missed access to Mac, which is why I actually shifted to Electron because I wanted access to the Mac platform. But MAUI actually solves that, and it gives you access to Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. One big thing is missing is Linux. It does not support Linux. Frankly, I cannot think why, because Android is a Linux, based operating system, and you have apps that run on Android. So it's quite possible for Microsoft or whoever is working on .NET MAUI. It's an open source technology to port to Linux. Maybe this will happen at a later stage. But among these four platforms, I think you are very well covering 95% of use cases. You're covering 95% users online. They have access to the apps that you create, and that is truly wonderful. And I find that when you measure up the lack of Linux in comparison with getting access to iOS and Android, oh my God, that you don't even need to think about it. That MAUI gives you access to a bigger number of users, and that is definitely a big win. Then let's talk about the architecture a little bit. Electron runs on Chromium browser. So there are two parts of Electron. There is a part which runs backend, which has access to your computer. Like you got a desktop app, it's running on your computer. The backend runs on the computer using Node.js, which is again a JavaScript engine. It's based on the Chromium browser too. And that part has access to the computer. It can modify files, it can read files, it can do a lot of operations with your computer. And the front end is based on the Chromium browser code. Now we have a lot of browsers using Chromium. We've got of course Google Chrome, we've got Microsoft Edge. Edge is now based on Chromium, and we've got Brave, and actually a bunch of browsers which is based on the Chromium browser code. And the Electron apps that you create, they too have the Chromium browser. Actually, the front end of the Electron app is nothing but a Chromium browser compiled to run only your application. It's actually a full-fledged, fully capable browser based on the Chrome code base. And MAUI is a little bit different. These applications are compiled natively for each platform. So there is no virtual machine, there is no nothing running, kind of an emulation thing going on. It's just a regular app created for the platform, and it's compiled differently for each platform that you want to target. So Windows has an executable, the Mac will have a DMG file, you will be making APKs for Android, and so on. So every app is natively compiled, and typically you will write the front end of the app in a language called XAML. XAML is an XML based UI definition language. It's not that difficult to learn. Frankly speaking, when I started learning XAML, I really enjoyed it. The kind of making the layout was quite easy. It's not difficult. But definitely it's not as capable as HTML and CSS, and all the work that has gone into these platforms, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, it has made the ecosystem immensely rich. There are so many samples, so many UI experts available that you won't find in XAML. So that's a win for Electron. I count it as a win, even though there is a way in MAUI to overcome that. And I'm going to talk about this in the next slide. But even then, I call it a win, because Electron kind of lets you just go ahead and write your UI in HTML. And in MAUI, if I were to create an app, I would typically write my app using the XAML application, as I using the XAML language. Frankly, I wouldn't mind that much. Next, I have explained to you, of course, this point that interfaces in HTML and CSS, and MAUI has interface in XAML. But, and this is kind of a game changer, that's what uh, changed my opinion about MAUI when I saw it about 2 weeks ago, and it made me so excited. You can now create interfaces in MAUI in HTML and CSS with another new technology, with another interesting, very, very powerful technology called Blazor. So Blazor is another technology created by Microsoft. And what it does is it uses WebAssembly. WebAssembly, of course, is a new standard that browsers are adopting to give access to all browser features to other languages than JavaScript. So Microsoft has used WebAssembly technology to give access to the browser and the interface using C sharp. So you can create basically SPAs, single page applications using C sharp, not using JavaScript. You can write your front end code in JavaScript and your back end code in, you can write your front end code in C sharp and your back end code in C sharp, everything through and through. And you can make a pretty powerful, application that does everything through one programming code base. No need to learn multiple programming languages, and you can have in your MAUI application all the interface done in HTML and CSS along with Blazor in C sharp, using something called a web browser control, which is a replacement for the earlier web browser control that we used to have in .NET application. The new Blazor web control can run Blazor code. It can run C sharp code on the front end of the browser, and that is a big win too. Of course, a programmer like me who's been working on C sharp since decades is probably going to enjoy it more because I have a lot of experience in it. And if you're coming from the Electron world, if you worked only in JavaScript, it's an interesting platform to learn, but there is a learning curve because JavaScript, is simpler. It's got less complicated constructs, and C sharp, even though it has many elements quite similar to JavaScript now, is a little bit different beast, and you will have to wrap your head around it. It won't take long, but the plus is that you will be able to create applications that are compiled natively, and you'll be able to run them with full access to the platform that you're running it on. So that's a plus, and you can have the interface in HTML and CSS just the way you want it. Next, I have already discussed it. Electron is all in JavaScript. MAUI is in C sharp. But if you do choose to use the Blazor way to create the UI, you can also interop with JavaScript. So if you got JavaScript plugins on the front end, if you got elements that are design elements which are based on JavaScript, you don't need to worry about it. They can run as usual, and you can call JavaScript functions using C sharp, and also JavaScript can call C sharp using interop. JavaScript can call C sharp too using interop. So it's two-way compatible. I wouldn't say I when I studied the code of interop and I saw how actually this works, I wouldn't say this is the best idea in the world. If you were going to create an application today and if you had a choice, I would ask that you code it in one platform only. So if you're going to code it in MAUI, you should do it in C sharp through and through, because interop creates its own set of problems. Because you see, when you run an MAUI app using the Blazor control, the JavaScript will run immediately after as the page is rendered. So because JavaScript is on the browser already, and when you run the page, first the HTML and CSS will load, and then as soon as the JavaScript script tag is encountered, the JavaScript is going to run, and your C sharp code is only going to run after the JavaScript execution finishes. And that can present some challenges, because data points which are available in JavaScript might not be available the same way in C sharp. Because if your JavaScript is modifying your interface, it's not going back to C sharp unless you expressly tell tell C sharp, using the interop. Otherwise, because MAUI creates, Blazor actually keeps a separate copy of the DOM, which it uses to which is modifies first before taking it to the browser appearance itself. So first, basically what happens is Blazor keeps a copy of DOM that it works on in memory, and only when there are changes, that particular change is rendered to the browser, and the front end, the person sees that changes. So this creates problems, because if you're modifying the front end of the browser with JavaScript, your backend copy of the DOM doesn't know about it, and this really can complicate affairs. So if you're gonna code in MAUI, go with one language, and of course that's gonna be C sharp. Now, uh, when you work with Electron and you want to call something on the from the OS, let's say you want to create, you capture a screenshot, or you want to read a file, you want to do something that is for on the desktop computer, that needs resources on the desktop computer, you cannot do that natively, because what you're running on the screen is a Chromium browser which does not have access to the computer itself. And for that, what you need to do is you need to call backend code which is running on Node from your front-end browser. And this creates a new mess of IPC renderer and IPC main and both inter-process communication, which is quite complicated. Now, I have made videos on this. I have made a dedicated video on inter-process communication, sorry. And I got to tell you, it's a concept that needs a little bit of work on. And I find that too many people are confused about inter-process communication to just get to the desktop, to just get to the computer resources. And that problem is not there in MAUI, because it's compiled natively. Your code has perfect access to all the platform OS functions, even the APIs, and it's definitely easier to use. If you're going to run some APIs from the operating system, MAUI is actually going to be quite easier. Now, Electron is also a bit insecure. The reason is it's a browser, and if you're going to load up the browser, you're going to connect to the internet, and you use the application to visit any website online. That website can potentially run code on the desktop computer of your user, especially if you have not taken care of security, if you have turned node integration on, and you have allowed your browser app, your Electron app to execute code directly from the Chromium front end on your desktop computer using node integration. And if you've done that, it can create a can of worms. And now, in fact, Electron absolutely makes it difficult. They have turned it off by default. You need to turn it on and make that extra effort to make your app more insecure. And Electron does not recommend it. Basically, you should not do it. That's the bottom line. But with MAUI, it's not that bad, because security is you're not exposing your desktop computer the same way uh, like you are in Electron. Your JavaScript code still runs in that sandbox. It cannot access the backend APIs. Also, because of interop, it's not even running JavaScript in the backend. It's C sharp, And if you want to call that C# code which runs, which communicates with your hardware, you gotta use interrupt. And no website can just use interrupt like that, especially if you're designing your interface in XAML. That question does not even arise because you're not running a browser code at all. This will only arise when using the browser control and running and making your interface in HTML and CSS, and you will actually go to a separate website. Then this question arises, but even in that case it's more secure than Electron. And I think that's a big win too, because as an Electron programmer I had to go through a lot of hell trying to write all that renderer code, then making it work with IPC main and IPC renderer. It was basically a hellish experience with preload and everything going on. I didn't enjoy it. Of course, after some tries I was able to understand it and execute it in my app, and my app is nearly ready in Electron. But I found that a weak point, and for a newbie it can be a little bit harder to understand and actually create an app that works well using Electron. So if you want to create an Electron app and you're stuck with trying to understand how to run your code well with higher security, I have tutorials on that, and you can see that too. Okay, let's proceed with the presentation. I've got some more points. uh, Also, this is something I can call it subjective, but frankly speaking, uh, in my experience, compared to what I've been using earlier, Electron is more difficult to compile and distribute. So if I was to distribute an Electron app, I would have to, of course, compile it separately for each platform. But the problems don't stop there, because I need to create a setup to distribute it, to install it. And that means I have to distribute the entire Electron executable, and all these files are actually open. So if I've got like control, if I've got a images, and if I've got HTML files and all the code, JavaScript code, it can be decompiled pretty easily. Even if you create an ASR file, which is the Electron compile file, it can be decompiled very easily, and all your source code is open. I don't enjoy that, but it's not a deal breaker, because come on, like, it's possible to break any source code. Even if I create an app in MAUI, somebody who's got the right tools will be able to do that. So that's not the deal breaker. What I don't like is the entire setup process. The packages that we have on Electron are more complicated. They're more mostly designed for Node, and they were ported to Electron, and they don't perfectly support everything. I find that many of them don't work well, and there are issues that you need to get over. Also, there are so many different alternatives. There is no standardization. It makes a little more difficult, but that's what open source is about. I enjoy that vibrant ecosystem too. So I would give this point to MAUI, because the applications are easy to compile. You can hit a compile button, you get an executable every time, and easy to run, easy to distribute, because then you have a native application that's out of the box native. You can use any distribution system, any distribution channel, including the official channels, to distribute your MAUI app. Next, and this is something I really love about Electron, it has a huge set of APIs and plugins through package managers like npm, where you can find solutions to literally everything, because it's got a huge number of programmers working in the Node.js and JavaScript ecosystems. And you can find tools which are ready made, which has solved problems, amazing libraries which give you access to a lot of resources, and really extend the capabilities of your app. So that is amazing. I really love that about Electron. And in MAUI, frankly, this ecosystem does not exist. It doesn't exist even for .NET. There is a package manager, the NuGet package manager, and there are some libraries there. But I got to say that it does not rival the vibrant and amazing ecosystem of open source, particularly npm. We don't have anything like that in any MAUI, and that's a big win, because it solves your creative journey. It makes your creative journey easier. You're going to create an app, you don't have to write everything by yourself. You can plug in a library and things can become easier. In fact, in a recent application that I created in .NET, it's a web-based application. My team wrote one part in .NET, and ASP.NET MVC, actually ASP.NET Core MVC, and we are running that website on ASP.NET Core. But a part of it was written by me in Node.js, and I used some libraries to make that code run well, because those, if I wanted to write the same thing in ASP.NET Core, it would have taken more time, and I would have to host it on a Windows server or on a .NET Core machine, which is actually more costly. And I found Node.js hosting cheaper and easier. So I wrote half of this in Node.js, and my team wrote it in ASP.NET Core, and we just kind of combined the app using APIs, REST APIs. It was easy to do, and it's working very well. So this is something that is a big win for Electron, and I give this a thumbs up. I would say that Electron is very strong in this. Okay, then we have another issue that I think is a deal breaker for me personally. I don't like that at all about Electron. The executables are bloated. So if I create even a small app that does very very little, even that will be above a couple of hundred MBs in size, because you have to ship the entire Node.js runtime. You have to ship the entire Chromium browser too. You have to ship the entire Chromium runtime too. So that's two runtimes being shipped in your single executable. So even if you written like 10 lines of code, you have to ship multiple hundred megabytes of information alongside. And that is a bad user experience, because your customers are going to have to download that much and then run it, and it's going to eat up your memory, because you're going to run the entire browser in the memory. It's going to eat up your memory, and everything is going to be more bloated. It's just a bad way to do things. It's just something that I wouldn't want to do typically, but with Electron, of course, this is how it works. And thankfully, there are the computers are much more capable, so this is not something that will prevent a genuine application from finding a market. But with MAUI, things are quite compact. You can create an app that's native, and even it could be like 5 MBs or 3 MBs, because if you written very little code, it won't really have everything shipping with it. Of course, there's a .NET runtime too, and that has to be shipped separately. It's not a part of your main app. It's not packaged together, and certainly it's not as big as the entire Node.js and Chromium runtime. So MAUI generally makes compactor apps. So guys, I gotta say this. Electron is a bit more complicated and MAUI is a bit more simple. That said, I am going to continue programming in Electron, because like I said, the ecosystem is vibrant. There are many things that I can do in Node.js in particular that I cannot do in .NET platform. So I'm gonna work with Node.js more aggressively, and in the coming few months or years, I'm gonna also put MAUI as a focused area in my company. And some of the applications that I was gonna do in Electron, actually I'm gonna do them in MAUI and see how that works. It's not a proven technology, not proven even like Electron, because it's a very new tech. Not many people have started creating apps on it. So I guess I will be one of the few guys who start out early, but it is backed by the Microsoft team of engineers who are pretty good engineers. They have done amazing work in WPF and Xamarin after they took it over, and they've done good work in open sourcing the entire .NET platform. And I think it can be a potentially a great challenger for Electron, and many people will try to use more of MAUI, especially in the light of things that you get to create applications that run virtually really everywhere, desktop or mobile. Is just running everywhere, which is a beautiful thing. So guys, give me some feedback. Tell me in your comment why you're using Electron, and why would you not use MAUI, or why would you use MAUI? What's your reason of doing things, and what's your comparison? Let me know, and wait for my next video. I will be creating more videos on learning Electron, of course, because I'm still working on it every day. And I will be creating more videos on learning MAUI too as I get to it. And hopefully all of us will enjoy that, and we will learn new technologies that will help us create more amazing stuff for our audience. This is your friend in programming, Kodajit, signing out.